Oh, come on. Are we there? Oh, lads. You're never gonna. So, just quickly to explain before we delve in, we are going to talk testing, but I just want to explain how dumb I am very quickly. So I put this live stream live for 2:15. Okay, 2:15. You're probably thinking to yourself, "Oh, that's a little while ago, James." Yeah, I forgot to put it on public and put it on private, and then went live to nobody for 20 minutes because the stream was on private. I thought the chat was a little bit quiet, and it's because the live stream wasn't actually public to people. It was just me talking to myself for 20 minutes about testing. So there we go. We're a little bit later than I thought we were going to be, but you guys didn't even know that this was going to exist. So what a time we are living in, all right? We are absolutely flying today. Hello, everybody in the chat. Hello, Raul. CF Racing, lovely to see you, mate. Thank you for those PNGs as well. Appreciate that much. I appreciate that very much. Hello, Jamie, as well. SHT, I've forgotten your name, SHT. It's completely gone from my head. I'll remember it within the next few minutes. I see you on Instagram a lot. Testing's over. We're really only a few days away from the Formula One season. It does feel like the Formula One season is finally coming to fruition, doesn't it? It finally feels like this is the time now for Formula One to really start to kick in for this season. And I'm going to pop the chat up so we can see what is going on. But yeah, the live stream just got posted because it was supposed to be about half an hour ago. I did half of the live stream to nobody, all on my own. And I was a bit like, oh man, this is a bit gutting that nobody's turned up for this. Like I thought I'd put it live on the channel last night, and I had not. I'd put it on private, and then I'd just continued to have it on private and streamed to myself. But, you know, let's talk about testing, because testing was actually really fun this season. I thought it was very mellow, but it was very fun. And we're going to delve into each team and talk about where they are in terms of their testing, where I think they are in terms of the 2023 season, break it down a little bit and have a little chat between us, maybe do a few polls here and there about which team is going to do better when, and throughout the season, try and come up with almost our own Constructors' Championship understanding now that we've actually seen the cars on track. Because I don't know about you, but it feels like these Formula One cars, they're almost like mythical creatures for the first part of the season, right? We sort of hear about them. We hear discussions about whether they're good or bad. We then see a few pictures of them, or maybe just, you know, a few images and renders of the liveries, but we don't really see the actual car themselves, and they're kind of just shadowed in this mystery. Then all of a sudden, it comes in and you're like, yep, these are the cars on track. These are exactly what they're going to look like. And I'm so excited to see what is going to happen. Like, I feel like this season could be one of the tightest Formula One seasons that we've seen in a very long time. Not just at the top. I know you could obviously argue Max Verstappen versus Lewis Hamilton in 2021. I don't think we're ever going to see anything like that again in our lifetimes. I think it's going to be a very long time until we see a title battle that close. But in terms of the whole grid, like all 10 teams being very, very shunted, and all of them being kind of points worthy in terms of their performances over the years as well, I think we're going to see a really, really close field. Let's talk about testing just in general, though, as we kind of saw it happen. Obviously, day 3 classifications here for you. Sergio Perez the quickest, Nick De Vries the slowest. What we can take away from that? Not a lot, to be honest with you. There's not loads that we can take away from that moving into the season. Obviously, we don't know who's running what kind of packages. And again, testing comes with that allure of like, oh, are they running it at the highest possible performance that they can? Or are they holding something a little bit back? Are they sandbagging a little bit? Or is this the absolute optimum that they've got for the season? And that is yet to be seen. Obviously, if this was the finishing grid for the Bahrain Grand Prix next weekend, I'd be very, very surprised Sergio Perez winning it and Max Verstappen, well, DNFing because he didn't actually take place in day 3 in terms of Bahrain, but I imagine he'd be up there as well. Nico Hulkenberg in the house down towards the bottom. Oscar Piastri down towards the bottom as well. But let's kind of delve into each team and talk about each team and what we want from this season, because testing didn't deliver like loads of drama. There was nothing too dramatic overall. There were no shunts into the wall, which I'm quite thankful for. I thought, you know, It's going to be one of the rookies if it's likely to happen, or possibly Yuki Tsunoda. He likes to shunt into the wall as well, doesn't he? So luckily, nobody put it into the wall. Everybody kept it out. I thought it would have been quite funny if Nico Hulkenberg also put it in the wall after everything that went on with Mick Schumacher and replacing Mick Schumacher because he shunted it into the wall too often. And then Nico Hulkenberg went and did it. I thought that could be quite funny. But nothing happened like that. There were only a few incidents of reliability. Aston Martin on the first day, Mercedes on the second day, but there was no real reliability problems. Like, we didn't see a car massively catch fire or anything like that, or completely burn to the ground like we have done sometimes. And it's clear that every team has an understanding of their package now. Every team has an understanding of what they're aiming for, but also what they've built. I feel like 2022, all of the teams were so green. They just had no idea what was really going to happen with their car. And even though we were coming into the 2022 regulations a little bit blind, everybody was in the same boat where they were like, okay, this could work or this could work. We know Aston Martin came up with 4 different cars. Red Bull came up with something. Ferrari came up with something different. Mercedes came up with something completely different to everybody else. And it was just like nobody quite knew where they were going to be or what was going to happen. I like Formula One. Congrats on 10K. Thank you very much, mate. Thank you very much. Perez had the Bahrain curse. That would be interesting, though, if Perez did win the first race of the season and then came second, because that's what you do. Piastri had a spin. It was very close to the wall. I mean, Bahrain does help you out a little bit there. It's not like they had testing at Monaco and, you've got the walls literally right in top of you. Bahrain is quite nice. Got a little bit of runoff area for the teams. But yeah, it was a pretty uneventful testing, just because I think most of the teams now have an idea of what their package is going to be like, at least until 2026, right? So you've got 2022, all the cars were trying out lots of different things. 2023, they've kind of settled on an idea. And then 2024, 2025, I think will be sort of that building upon what you've already got. I think teams have now settled into what they've got for this season. They've settled into what their car is going to look like for the next 3 years, effectively, is where I think Formula One is at. But let's talk about each of the teams kind of individually and break it down a little bit. I'm going to go in the order of the standings last season, because that just kind of makes sense to me, to kind of break it down team by team and see whether or not we think, like Williams will improve or AlphaTauri will improve, or whether Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull at the top will drop backwards. And we can kind of delve into it a little bit from there. Let's talk about Williams first, because Williams are an interesting package coming into this season. I think, last season there weren't loads of positives that we could take away from Williams, to be honest with you. James Vowles coming into this season is an interesting prospect too, but of the positives that they did have in 2022, I would say that reliability was definitely one. And I still think that's going to be a positive for them moving forwards. Like, Alex Albon delivered really good drives for that Williams car, but also when he did pick up those points, or when we saw Nicholas Latifi or Nick De Vries also pick up points, it was because other teams had problems along the way. Williams were never really battling for points consistently. You'd say you've got those top 6 positions and then there's 4 more. Would you have ever predicted a Williams to be in that 4? Not really. They needed to have other things flow their way over the course of the Grand Prix weekend to really pick up those points. And therefore, I think they're going to be in that similar vein this season. Upgrades are coming. Thankfully, they've got Golf coming in. They've got more sponsors coming in. They've got Logan Sargent and all of his American sponsors hopefully coming into the team soon as well. I think American franchises will jump on Logan Sargent quite heavily over the next few seasons. I know that Ford are coming in with Red Bull, and we've possibly got Andretti coming in. We'll touch on that in a little bit. But I feel like Williams are in a good place moving forward. They can get closer to the cost cap. But also, I can see Vowles coming in and starting to think about, okay, Mercedes had this, Mercedes had that, and starting to think about how he can implement those things into Williams and where Williams really need to invest. Like, is it a new wind tunnel that they need? Is it a new testing facility that they need? Is it this aerodynamic setup that they need? Where can Williams really make that step forward? And he can kind of compare that to Mercedes, right? He can be like, well, this is almost what we have at Mercedes. So, that's pretty good. But this is stark difference to what we have at Mercedes. And therefore, I think this is the thing that needs to improve most quickly. Not to say that the team principals that they've had before at Williams didn't do a good job. I think that they did. But I think James Vowles will be hungrier in a sense. Like, I think he's going to come in and he almost knows, right, that if he does really well at Williams, he can then replace Toto Wolff at Mercedes. And that is a big job that is coming up very, very soon, I'd imagine, in Formula One. Like, Toto Wolff doesn't seem like the kind of guy who's going to stay at Mercedes forever. He feels like once Lewis Hamilton goes, I could see Toto Wolff kind of also bowing out, like almost the pair of them together. And therefore, it is going to come to a close at some point soon. You know, James Vowles, maybe 4 or 5 years at Williams and then into the Mercedes car. Possibly. I could see that happening. And this Williams is almost like a test run for him, right? How can he get on with a new team? Can he take a Williams forwards rather than backwards in terms of where they are right now in the Formula One grid? On top of that, Logan Sargent coming in is definitely a big step up on Nicholas Latifi, in my opinion. I don't think that's crazy to say that Nicholas Latifi didn't have the best 2022 season. Nicholas Latifi was never really of the level of the Formula One drivers that we want on the grid. And therefore, I'm glad that he is gone. I did like Nicholas Latifi. I liked him as a person, as a character, as someone to have on the grid. It was great. As a Formula One driver, not the case. So I'm quite glad that Nicholas Latifi is now gone and that Williams can step forward with Sargent and move into something a little bit different. Let's talk about AlphaTauri, because I think that they also need to think about stepping forward sometime soon. AlphaTauri coming into this year, Yuki Tsunoda, Nick De Vries, now their drivers. Still the ugliest car on the Formula One grid, in my opinion. If there is a picture of it, it is absolutely awful. There isn't a picture of it straight off the bat. That's last year's car. There isn't a picture of it straight off the bat, but still the ugliest car on the Formula One grid, the AlphaTauri, in my opinion, by a long, long way as well. But 2022 really did disappoint for AlphaTauri, especially when you compare to 2021. And you had like Pierre Gasly at times was like the 4th, 5th quickest car out there and was like, sometimes looking at the like edging towards podium positions in that AlphaTauri car in 2021. 2022, it just all fell apart. They completely got the regulations wrong. And I know that they have links to Red Bull, and AlphaTauri obviously don't like to see themselves as the sister team of Red Bull. They almost like to see themselves as a separate entity, which you kind of have to respect in one way, right? You have to respect that they want to do things in their own way. They don't just want to be seen as Red Bull 2.0. They do want to build their own car. They want to have their own facilities. They want to understand the aerodynamics in their own way. But when your Red Bull car is very, very quick, and the Red Bull car is by far and away the best car on the Formula One grid in the 2022 season, it seems a little bit silly not to use those connections just a little bit more, just to give yourself even a little bit of a boost moving forward. But they don't take that much from Red Bull at all, do AlphaTauri. Like, we're going to talk about Haas in a second. Haas take every single little bit of that Ferrari that they possibly can. They basically copy and paste the Ferrari across, and then the FIA go, no, you can't have that bit and that bit. And they go, okay. And then they delete that bit. Like, literally, they take as much of that Ferrari as they can across. AlphaTauri do the opposite of that. They take the minimal that they can from Red Bull. They take the engine, they take a few of the engine covers, the gearbox covers, and that's about it. They take very, very little from the Red Bull team, and that seems a little bit silly to me. Then we've also got Tsunoda and Nick De Vries and how we feel about them moving forward. I'd like to know in the chat how you feel about Tsunoda and Nick, because I'm still so undecided on these two. I have an inkling of who's going to beat who, but I think it's going to flip-flop over the course of the season. I could see Tsunoda coming out of the blocks maybe and being first, and then Nick De Vries taking a few points and getting himself in front of Tsunoda, and then Tsunoda coming back. I could see this really ebbing and flowing, almost like a tennis match between these two over the course of the season. And the driver that comes out on top, I feel like it's going to be like 1 or 2 performances that separates out these two. I could see it being really, really close. If you look at them, though, in terms of what I think moving into this 2023 season, I think Tsunoda will edge out Nick De Vries just by a tiny fraction. I think Tsunoda right now, coming into his 3rd season in Formula One, without Gasly, without the help of Gasly, I think it could go one of 2 ways. Gasly was a real foil for Yuki Tsunoda and really did help Yuki Tsunoda get into the spirit of Formula One and really did help him step forward in Formula One and sort of show what he was all about. Now I think you take that away. You take that comfort blanket away from Yuki Tsunoda. He almost has to step up again. He has to do it all over again. He now has to assert his dominance in this team. And AlphaTauri going with Yuki Tsunoda for the future, I think makes sense. I think it just makes a little bit more sense than going with Nick De Vries for the future. I think of those two, one of them will probably go at the end of the season. I think Red Bull have lots of drivers in Formula 2 right now that are looking like they could finally click into gear. Like Red Bull have been a little bit lacking in talent over the last few seasons. They kind of went through them very quickly. They went through Gasly and Albon super fast in terms of the Red Bull setup. And then they kind of lagged behind a little bit. Since Yuki Tsunoda has come through, there hasn't really been anybody else knocking on the door. I think that won't be the case by the end of the season. I think we're going to see a few of those Red Bull juniors really start knocking on the door of the Formula 1 setup by the end of this season. And I think Nick De Vries almost feels like a little bit of a placeholder. He's got 1 year at AlphaTauri. Maybe he finds himself a seat somewhere else in the future. I can't really see that happening, though. And therefore, I think Nick De Vries is going to be probably gone by the end of the season. Although AlphaTauri, I don't think are going to be amazing either. AlphaTauri is tricky. It's tricky to see where they're going to go. You think Yuki might lose his seat? This is what I mean, Ethan. Like, I'm so 50-50 on it. I can see it going either way. I think it's going to be very, very tight. I think one of them is going to lose their seat. Which one? It's going to be so hard to call over the course of the season. It's going to be really difficult to understand who's going to be where. Let's talk about Haas very quickly as well. Haas coming into this season, obviously MoneyGram Haas, I should say. They're coming into this season with MoneyGram as their new title sponsor, Kevin Magnussen, Nico Hulkenberg. I think, is it me or does it look really good? Is it me or does it just look really good? I know that they're not, right up there. Kevin Magnussen in 7th place, Nico Hulkenberg in 15th place, but it just doesn't feel like Calamity Haas like it has done over the last few seasons. Like, you look at the 2021 campaign and like Haas were abysmal. Like, it was just so rubbish from Haas over the course of 2021. I know that they had so much financial issue. They didn't really want to get rid of Kevin Magnussen and Romain Grosjean. They didn't really want to bring Mick Schumacher and especially Nikita Mazepin in. But it just feels like Haas have been a little bit of a calamitous drama around them all of the time over the last few seasons. And finally now, they've settled in. Got 2 drivers that are not very exciting, let's be honest with you. Nico Hulkenberg is not going to set the grid on fire. He's not a rookie coming in that I can see like stepping up to the plate in the next few seasons and possibly move into Ferrari or move into Mercedes. Like, he is an older head. He's going to come in. He's going to be very, very consistent. And I think, considering they started 2022 incredibly well, they only had 1 major upgrade over that entire season. If they can bring in a few more upgrades over the course of this season, start in a similar vein. I'm not expecting Kevin Magnussen to come 5th again in the first race of the season, but if they can maybe pick up a couple of points and start in that vein where they feel positive moving forward, they look like a really solid team. And, the Suck My Balls boys, they're back together. Maybe they can make something happen. Maybe Kevin Magnussen picks up a podium. Maybe Nico Hulkenberg picks up a podium in this Haas car. Like, I could see them doing something a little bit crazy just in one race out of the 2023 season. The 23 races that we've got in 2023, like, messes my head because we had 22 races in 2022 as well. And it just doesn't quite line up. Are we going to have 24 in 2024, 25 in 2025? That'd be interesting. But anyway, I think Haas look, really good, really improved, and a bit like they could use this season as the step forward. I think they're going to have Kevin Magnussen, Nico Hulkenberg in the team for the next few years. And then, maybe there's a youngster that comes along in a couple of years' time, replaces one of these two, and then Haas suddenly, like, 2026. Again, everyone's looking at 2026 as that one, but maybe Haas can just separate themselves out from the Williamses, from the AlphaTauris that are kind of down there at the moment in time, and kind of be back into that midfield Haas. Whether they'll get 5th place again. Got to remember, Haas did come 5th in the Constructors' Championship once. I don't think so. Maybe they can battle for 6th, though. Yeah, the fight for 6th is going to be good this year, right? Haas are definitely in that battle for it, I think, when it comes to breaking into that kind of second 3. Because we had the top 3, then a middle 3, and then I think we're going to have like a bottom 4. I think Haas could be the one in that bottom 4 that really starts to knock on the door of the 3 that are above them. Aston Martin, though. The fact that Aston Martin came here in the Constructors' Championship last year, I don't think they're going to come here in the Constructors' Championship this year. I think Aston Martin look incredible this season. Incredible. Fernando Alonso, Lance Stroll coming into this year. Fernando Alonso, I think, is a massive upgrade, first and foremost. I feel like This year could be their year. Do we say this every year about Aston Martin? Do Aston Martin say this about Aston Martin every year? Yes, they do. Because Aston Martin seems to just say this every season. They're like, next year, lads, going to be our year. They said it in 2021. They were like, no. Even though we're battling with AlphaTauri and McLaren right now, we're going to sack that off. We're going to focus on 2022. 2022 came around. No, we're not going to focus on 2022. We're going to wait until our factory is finished. We're going to wait until we've got drivers that we like. We're going to wait until various bits and pieces. 2023 is going to be our year, 2023. Now it's 2023. Their factory is built. They're going to be battling with the midfield teams. They have no more excuses, in my opinion. They've got all of the infrastructure that they wanted for this team moving forward. And Aston Martin feel like this year could be their year. Finally, it's come into fruition. They say it all the time. And it is now for Aston Martin. They had a great back end of last year as well. Like, we remember Sebastian Vettel, I'm thinking Japan, Singapore, those kind of races. Austin as well. Aston Martin had a really incredible turnout. Had Lance Stroll not driven into Fernando Alonso, maybe they'd have picked up a double points finish there. Aston Martin, I think, have been building to this, right? They look like they might even be in that situation where they could start to, again, breach into that top 3 sometime soon, possibly. But I think let's talk about the drivers first. Stroll, in terms of the Stroll situation, doesn't look like he's going to be back for Bahrain. I feel like we'd have had some sort of confirmation of that by now. Obviously, Drugovich came in. Drugovich did pretty well, actually. I think Drugovich, considering it was like a last minute thrown into Bahrain Aston Martin car, I was fairly happy with his performances. I think, him sticking in and around that Aston Martin setup, could see him get a Formula One seat sometime soon, maybe replacing Stroll in the future. I feel like that would be a good move, but Stroll obviously is going to keep hold of that seat as long as Lawrence Stroll is around. So it's not going to probably happen very often or very soon, unfortunately. Alonso is the driver, though, for me. Alonso is the driver that I'm really keeping an eye on this season. I think he was so good in that Alpine car last year. A little bit under the radar good sometimes in that Alpine car, where it kind of came to a stop at like some point in the race and it cost him points, and then people kind of forgot that he probably should have picked up quite a few more points over the course of the season. He kept reminding us, don't get me wrong, but when you look at like the standings at the end of the season, you see Fernando Alonso behind Esteban Ocon. I don't think that tells the real story that's going on there. And therefore Alonso, I think these 2 years with Aston Martin are going to be really, really pivotal, not only for Fernando Alonso, but also for Aston Martin. If they can click together, if they can gel, Fernando Alonso is one of the best drivers to have on the grid if you can get him happy in a seat. Making Fernando Alonso happy is a very, very difficult task. I have no idea how you make this man happy. He's a multi-millionaire. He seems miserable a lot of the time. But if they can make him happy and they can get him into a position where he likes driving that Aston Martin car, I think he could be really, really good. I think we could see a reasonable shout for like consistent points for both drivers over the course of every single race this season, where we're kind of thinking about, okay, it's going to be the top 6. And then you know how we had like the top 6 plus Lando Norris and Fernando Alonso last season. I think it could be a similar thing where we're like, okay, we've got the top 6 plus the Aston Martin 2, and then they're going to be in those like bottom 4 places in the points. And then how do we shuffle in another 2 drivers in there? I think we could get to that point where both drivers are consistently looking at a points finish. I think Aston Martin will come 4th. I think Aston Martin will come 4th in the Constructors' Championship. I've thrown that gauntlet down for them. I think I'm really positive coming into this season for the Aston Martin setup. 4th place seems reasonable for them. And then 2024, could they break into the top 3? If Mercedes still aren't quite there, if Ferrari's reliability isn't as good as they think it's going to be, could Aston Martin be that team that starts to breach into that top 3? I think so. I think, I think if you're looking at like McLaren, Alpine, Aston, which one do I trust the most to be able to put together a season where they could break into the top 3? If they can get it right in 2023 and then move into 2024, I think it could be the one. Could be the one. McLaren in the mud. We'll get to McLaren in a second. Let's talk Alfa Romeo first and foremost, though, because They were in 6th place in the constructor standings in the 2023 season. Alfa Romeo, the final year of Alfa Romeo as well, the final year with the Italians. It does feel like they've been in and around the Formula One grid for a little while. Obviously, they came in a few seasons ago. We've had Giovinazzi, we've had Kimi Raikkonen, we've had some good times with Alfa Romeo. Charles Leclerc as well, I should definitely mention in there as a notable Alfa Romeo driver, but I think it's coming to an end at quite a nice time for Alfa Romeo too. They had the worst reliability in terms of cars last year, just absolutely appalling. And then at times, I think they also had the worst car. I think it's difficult to say that when the Williams was still on the grid in the 2022 season. But at the same time, I think Alfa Romeo, towards the end of the season, you could argue that they had the worst car out of everybody in a few of those races. I'm not saying like in total, but in a few of those races, they definitely had the worst car of the season. And they've sorted out the Ferrari engine, hopefully, so maybe those reliability issues won't quite be there anymore, but I still think this is going to be like a weird interim season for Alfa Romeo. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to be a weird season where, yes, they've got loads of people coming in, starting to work for them. They've got Andreas Seidel coming in. He's going to want to make changes, but he's not really going to want to make changes for the now, if you know what I mean. Like, he is thinking about Audi coming in 2026. So everything that he is putting in place, all of the infrastructure that he wants to put in place, all of the people that he's trying to get into the team, he's got 2026 in mind. He hasn't got this year in mind. He doesn't care what this Alfa Romeo team really does in this 2023 season, I don't think. And therefore, it's going to be this weird kind of season of transition where Joe and Bottas deliver. They're okay. They do well. They pick up some points here and there. They put in some good performances. They're both fairly consistent. I like both of them as drivers, but I don't think we're going to see anything crazy from Alfa Romeo. Yeah, exactly. They had the worst reliability. Joe and Bottas are both good. I think they'll do okay. I think they'll be fine. And then Alfa Romeo moving into Sauber next year, maybe Sauber Audi. I think that will be more fun, at least, to see what Sauber can do compared to this Alfa Romeo team. Because also Alfa Romeo are not going to want to pump any money into this, right? Audi are going to be pumping in money, sort of, from one end. But Alfa Romeo are going to be like, you want an upgrade? No. We're leaving at the end of the year. Why on earth would we pump like millions of dollars into this when we know that we're not going to be remembered anymore because Audi are going to come in and completely change everything up? So Alfa Romeo, weird interim season for them. Not looking amazing, but also not looking terrible. I think they'll do okay. And their testing was fine. Much better than last season. They didn't seem to crumble in the same way that they did last season in testing. They had some real problems last season in testing. They had a much better testing this time around. Okay. The one you've probably all been waiting for, the one we've left until 5th place in the Constructors' Championship. It's McLaren. Where do we begin? Where do we begin with McLaren for the 2023 season? Lando Norris is punching walls already. So that's a thing. Lando Norris, known as one of, the easier going characters on the grid, doesn't really have a reputation in the same way that, maybe like a Fernando Alonso does. Even like a Lewis Hamilton at times has had that like kind of flaring reputation on the grid. Lando Norris has been known as like that easygoing, happy-go-lucky guy on the grid. When he's getting out of the car after testing, punching a wall, it's a tricky time for McLaren moving forward. A tricky time, I think, would be fair to say. And last year, we absolutely sucked at Bahrain too. We absolutely had the worst Bahrain. People kind of forget this because it kind of came together over the next couple of races. But Bahrain 2022, both of the McLarens finished outside of the points. Daniel Ricciardo looked incredibly lost in that McLaren car. And he still came above Lando Norris in that Bahrain Grand Prix. It's very concerning what's going on at McLaren right now. Like, nobody seems happy with the car at all. Lando Norris seems miserable. Zach Brown seems miserable. Andreas Stella doesn't seem happy with where the team is going. I feel like because they've lost Seidel, they've lost a little bit of the rudder that was moving them forwards. And yeah, it's going to be so tricky. Connor saying P8 for McLaren. Please, no, we can't. We were 3rd. Remember 3 seasons ago when we came 3rd in the Constructors' Championship? And then it was like a close battle for 3rd and we came 4th to Ferrari. And then it was a close battle for 4th and we came 5th to Alpine. Like, we love a close battle, don't we? We love a close battle for a position and then just missing out. Just missing out. That's basically what McLaren do. We have a close battle for the position that we want, and then we just miss out and come the position below. And we've done that over the last 3 seasons, where we've come 3rd and then 4th and then 5th. And like 6th is the absolute minimum, right? So, like, we've got to follow the pattern at least. Go into 6th place. And yeah, it's just, I'm so worried. I'm so worried about this season. And the problem is, on top of that, Piastri needs time as well. Piastri needs time to bed in, settle into the car, understand what's going on at McLaren. And I just don't know if he's going to get that time. I really am worried that he's not going to get that time in the McLaren setup, because there's going to be so much pressure on him to deliver straight off the bat. I don't think he's going to be gone at the end of the season, don't get me wrong, but there's already going to be like media backlash. There's going to be people talking about him. There's going to be people criticizing him for picking McLaren over Alpine. Like, it's going to be so tough for him to adjust to Formula One, and on top of that, have all of the media attention that is going to come along with this. It's just going to be so bad for McLaren this year. Lando overperforming is basically what we need again. Lando's overperformed over the last couple of seasons, and we need Lando to overperform again. Like, we have to have him really overperform again. Lando and Audi 2026, definitely I could see that happening. I could see Lando Norris just becoming frustrated this season with what's going on. McLaren could easily be 8th, 7th or 8th. Oh, 6th is where I'm aiming right now with where we're feeling. We've got to remember, McLaren had a terrible test at Bahrain last season and a terrible Bahrain Grand Prix, and it did kind of click together over the first sort of 4 or 5 races, and Lando Norris did manage to sort of carry us to a 5th place in the championship. Maybe we can see that happen again. Maybe it's just going to be another Lando Norris smash and grab, get points when he can, and hopefully carry us a little bit in terms of the positions. Like those 15 points that we got from that one that one podium that he got absolutely helped us throughout the entire season, didn't they? Funny thing is, Danny did bad last year, had to leave, but the McLaren's race winner. Lando needs to win ASAP. I don't think he's getting a win anytime soon. Do not think he's getting a win anytime soon. And I think if there's a team that's more likely to get a win, it's Aston Martin or Alpine. Alpine, I think, coming into this 2023 season, looked pretty good, actually. I was a little bit concerned. I was a little bit worried that Alpine might be a bit, again, kind of rudderless without Alonso. They kind of take the Alonso news to heart a bit. They might not quite know what direction to move in. Although Esteban Ocon has been there long enough now that they have an idea of what they're going to get from Esteban Ocon. And I'm just not sure, like, what's going to happen with those two, Gasly and Ocon. They've apparently become friends. Are they really friends? Who knows? Who knows at this point? Are Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon just going to be absolutely best of mates, and they're going to drag this Alpine team to a 4th place battle with Aston Martin? Or are we going to see fireworks between them? I'm very interested to see what happens. As a Pierre Gasly fan, I would very much like Pierre Gasly to come in and absolutely trounce Esteban Ocon. Do I think that's going to happen, though? Probably not. I think Gasly and Ocon have both proven that they're Formula One worthy. They're both Formula One winners. They've only got one win apiece, and they got a little bit lucky to get those wins. But you do have to get lucky if you're in a midfield car and you want to win a Formula One Grand Prix. So I think moving into this season, I'm happy with where Alpine are at. I think Alpine will chuck a lot of money at this season with 2 French drivers in the team, the Renault backing as well. I think because they'll understand that Alpine are now under pressure from Aston Martin as well. They kind of got a little bit, I don't know, a little bit complacent maybe in 2022. Like Fernando Alonso was throwing shade, but he was talking about how, you know, because they'd won championships in the past, maybe like it wasn't quite the setup that he was hoping for. And he sort of saw them as, he wanted a little bit more from the Alpine setup. And I think because they were quite happy with coming 4th, they kind of just settled for coming 4th. Whereas now Aston Martin are there, they're going to have to change up what they're doing a little bit, and they're going to have to kind of battle it out a little bit more so than they have in the previous years. But we'll have to kind of wait and see when it comes to that with Alpine. I think it's going to be Alpine and Aston Martin in and around that 4th place in the Constructors' Championship. In my predictions, I went for Aston Martin, but then I also had McLaren 5th, and I think McLaren then dropped behind Alpine. So where are Alpine going to end up? What's Alpine going to do? Who's going to come out on top between Gasly and Ocon? There's lots of questions still to be answered for Alpine, but I do think it's going to be a better season this season than they had last season. You're better than Joe Root. I don't know what that means. What do you think about Alpine? Will they be better in testing? I think they'll be better than the testing suggests. Lando finished 30 points ahead of Ocon last year. Tight midfield battle. See him doing the same to Bottas. Ooh. Ocon gonna destroy Gasly. Okay. I'm not so sure. Not so sure about that. Feel like it's gonna be tight. It's gonna be a tight battle between the two. I'd quite like to see Gasly beat Ocon though. Quite like to see Gasly beat Ocon. Yeah, they're trying to sort out their gremlins. They're trying to find various bits and pieces with that Alpine car that are not quite there yet, but will come to fruition, I'm sure, very soon. Should we move into the top 3, the big 3? So far, we're pretty happy with Williams. Think Williams are moving in the right direction. AlphaTauri, not so sure about where they're going to be, especially after testing. I don't think they're going to make massive steps forward. Haas, I'm really excited to see what they can do. Haas, I think, have made steps forward. They've got the 2 reliable drivers that they've wanted now. I think if they can bring more upgrades than just one over the course of the season, they'll do much better. Aston Martin are the real package for me. Aston Martin look like they're definitely going to break into that kind of talking about 4th place, best of the rest slot, and whether or not they'll be able to sustain that over the course of the season, we'll have to wait and see. Whether or not 2024 they'll be able to break into that top 3, I also think is a question that could be, pondered to them and maybe answered over the course of this year. Alfa Romeo, bit of a write-off of a season, not really expecting anything from them whatsoever. Reliability will be better, drivers will still be okay, but the car itself, I'm not imagining will be fantastic in any sort of sense. And I think with the kind of transitional season that they're going through, it'll be weird and they might not get the upgrades that they need on time and various bits and pieces. McLaren, I think everybody is not feeling very happy about them right now, and therefore let's just brush over those a little bit. And Alpine to round out kind of the other guys. Looking at them, McLaren, Aston Martin, I feel like Alpine are right in that mix. And then whether or not Gasly will come to fruition, Ocon can keep up that kind of sustained pace that he's managed to show over the last few seasons, we'll kind of have to wait and see. But let's delve into the top 3 then, and where the real business end of the season is going to be. Starting with Mercedes, because Mercedes came 3rd in the Constructors' Championship last season. How do we feel about Mercedes? It still feels like they're not quite there yet. You know what I mean? It still feels like Mercedes just needs something else to really click for them moving forward so that they can just kind of have that identity back, that identity of like proper winners in Formula One. Mercedes, just to me, they're much improved. Don't get me wrong. Like if we look at the start of 2022 and the end of 2022, they made an incredible amount of progress, right? They much improved in 2022. Hamilton was so close to a win. George Russell did manage to get a win in Brazil. If you look at the second half of the season, like post-summer break, they outscored Ferrari. So Mercedes were knocking on the door of being like a proper title Constructors' Championship worthy team. They were knocking on the door, but not quite there yet, right? They were sort of edging towards it. Ferrari still were having issues with reliability, and they were still having issues with having to take penalties, and also their team just the strategies that they came up with. But anyway, we'll talk about Ferrari in a second. In terms of Mercedes, I think reliability helped them out a lot. I think reliability did a lot of the heavy carrying for Mercedes, and the fact that Red Bull missed out on a couple of races towards the beginning of the season. Ferrari also had various DNFs over the course of the year. Like, they were always there to just pick up the pieces. It was kind of George Russell's role, right, in the first few races of that 2022 campaign, to just be the other guy. Like, it was like the Ferraris, the Red Bulls, and then it was like, oh, George Russell's in the top 5 as well. He's just the other guy because Perez maybe had a DNF. Max Verstappen had a DNF. Charles Leclerc hit into a wall. Like, it was just seemed like George Russell was always there because somebody else had made a mistake. And whether or not that reliability is going to still help them out as much, like, I can't see Red Bull having 2 DNFs in the first 3 races like they did last year. I can't see Ferrari's reliability being as bad as it was last year either. Like, you got to remember, Ferrari towards the end of the season were taking so many engine penalties and so many gearbox penalties because they had to replace so much of what they destroyed in the first few races of the season. Like, we got to, I think, was it Canada? And Charles Leclerc was already taking engine penalties. That is very early in the season to be taking an engine penalty. And that just then sustains throughout, right? You just have to keep taking engine penalties when you want to shuffle around. Those, wow, Jamie gifted 10 memberships. Thank you so much. That is mad. What? Thank you. Thank you incredibly. I appreciate that massively. I do need to start doing more members stuff. I feel like we needed some members-y things going on. But thank you. There is a members video if you do want to check out and be part of that. But wow, thank you. Oh, and some proper top drawer names in there have been gifted this membership as well. There is one video out on my channel that is for members only at this moment in time. But anyway, thank you, Jamie. Appreciate that. It's going to now roll through in this bottom corner for all of us to have a look at. But yeah, Lewis Hamilton, George Russell, I think are the strongest driver pairing on the Formula One grid. I think I'm now happy to say that. You know what I mean? I'm happy to be like, okay, Lewis Hamilton, George Russell are definitely the strongest driver pairing. I think coming into 2022, I kind of half said it. I was like, maybe, as long as George Russell can turn up and George Russell can be the driver that we're expecting him to be, can make that step up from Williams to Mercedes. I think that's maybe now what we're seeing, right? He is finally taking that step up from Williams to Mercedes. He proved himself over the course of the 2022 season. And now it's like, okay, George, you've proved yourself. You've won a Grand Prix. Now is the year you really need to kick on. So he needs to be like a lot closer to those guys, the Leclercs, the Perez's, in those qualifyings, in those races. And I want to see more of George Russell kind of going a bit wheel to wheel. We saw it a few times, but I didn't think we saw it loads over the course of last season. Again, because a lot of the time he was just driving for damage limitations. He was just driving a lot of the time to make sure that he finished the Grand Prix. And that was about it. And then Lewis Hamilton, I think, was massively disappointed with 2022. I think reasonably so, was disappointed with 2022, but seems like a different character coming into 2023. I think he's finally found a little bit of positivity again. I think he's happy with where the team is at. I think he understands what went wrong in 2022 and why he didn't manage to get the results that he wanted to. Obviously, if you look again at the beginning of the 2022 season for Lewis Hamilton, he was doing so much heavy lifting for the team, right? He was indeed. Yeah, he was trying to use his experience a little bit to just try and understand the car. He was testing out various bits and pieces. He was always changing the setup. He was always changing their aerodynamic balance. They were trying so many different things on Lewis Hamilton's car. Sometimes it worked. A lot of the time it didn't. And therefore, that was why Lewis Hamilton just was fighting for every single possible point that he could get. And then you look at the second half of the season where they did seem to find at least a setup that Lewis Hamilton quite liked and George Russell quite liked and the Mercedes team quite liked. And then they started to pick up consistent podiums. George Russell won a Grand Prix. Lewis Hamilton came second 5 or 6 times in the second half of the season. Like, it felt like Mercedes were back onto the podium more consistently. And as I said, they actually outscored Ferrari in the second half of the season. So I'm very positive about Mercedes coming into 2023. Testing was 50-50. 50-50. They had a couple of issues over the course of testing that they had to kind of get rid of and sort out for themselves. But overall, I'd say that testing went really well for Mercedes. And moving into 2023, 2024, are they going to be back towards the top? Could we see another Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen title fight? I think so. I think they could be back up there, at least within the next couple of years or so. Penultimate team then, Ferrari. And Ferrari, I think there's quite a few things to delve into here. It looked like they had an okay testing. Ferrari coming into this year, Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz, obviously world champions 16 times. And it's been a long time. It's been a long time coming for Ferrari. It's been a long time that they've been trying to build up towards this ability to fight for championships again. 2022 looked like it was going to be the year that they were going to be able to fight for a championship. And really, they should have been able to fight for a championship in 2022. Reliability looks a lot better this year, or at least from what they've said, the reliability of that Ferrari engine looks a bit better. And that means that they can hopefully keep the Ferrari engine on high. So towards the middle of the last season, because the engine and reliability, they're having so many problems, they did have to turn it down, which is why there was a massive drop-off in terms of Ferrari's pace, not only in qualifying, but mainly in the races over the course of 2022, right? If you look at it, Ferrari had the best car of the first half of the season. I know Max Verstappen won more races, but Charles Leclerc got more pole positions over the course of the 2022 season. They did have the faster car. They just didn't have the faster race car. And it was that turning down of the engine, having to work around, trying to keep various parts of the Ferrari car actually working and functioning that cost them. If that then is taken away, we're now pointing the finger at the next problem that Ferrari had, which was strategy, right? They strategy problems that they had too. The team making a lot of mistakes over the course of the season. It's just one of those things with Ferrari where, like, when it rains, it pours. Like, they had the reliability problem, and then it kicked into, okay, so we've turned the engine down a little bit. Now we're looking to, like, build on strategy. Now we're having strategy problems. Okay, but at least we can lean on the drivers. Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz make mistakes, and it's like, it just seems to continually fall apart for Ferrari over and over and over. But I think coming into this year, Binotto took a lot of the blame for that, right? Binotto, he had his ups and downs. I think Binotto was the right man for Ferrari, just at the wrong time. I feel like if Binotto had come into a Ferrari setup that was already winning, he could have sustained a winning Ferrari team. But he came into a Ferrari team that was looking to improve. And therefore, I think moving into that, trying to get them up to a championship battling team. I mean, he kind of did that, right? He took them from 2018, 2019, I want to say off the top of my head. And he did rebuild. He changed it up. He managed to get them through the era of Vettel and replace Vettel. And he managed to bring in Carlos Sainz, who's been a great driver for them. He managed to get them through the 2021 season and get third place in the Constructors' Championship. And it looked like Binotto was, moving in the right direction. It's just when it came down to it, when the pressure really came down to it and the crux of the championship season was with him, he wasn't able to deliver. And I liked Binotto. I thought Binotto was very good. I don't blame him for what happened. I blame him for not taking responsibility or not blaming the team a lot of the time. It seemed like he took responsibility a lot of the time, or he kind of delved out responsibility to tires or the weather or the track, but it never felt like he blamed anyone around him. And I feel like that was just the culture that he was brought up in. He really didn't want to take any of the Ferrari people that he'd worked with for so long down with him. You know what I mean? Like, he'd worked at Ferrari for 20 plus years. He'd been there when Michael Schumacher was still winning championships with the team. Like, he'd worked with these people. These people were his friends, his loved ones, and he didn't want to point the finger at them. And that, in the end, he therefore had to point the finger at himself and therefore stepped away from his role. I think it would have been, obviously we got the news that he stepped away. I think it would have been him and Ferrari both discussing it and deciding that enough's enough. Yes, Leclerc made mistakes. Yes, Sainz made mistakes. But at the end of the day, I really like Vasseur coming in with this driver pairing. Let's talk about the driver pairing first. Leclerc versus Sainz. The number one, right? The number one debate. Who is the number one in the team? I think is very, very close, actually. I don't think it's as far apart as people are giving Carlos Sainz credit for. I think if you ask 90% of Formula One fans, they'd say Charles Leclerc, and maybe the 10% would say Carlos Sainz. And I think it's actually a bit closer than that. I feel like Carlos Sainz, if he is delivered a car that he's comfortable with straight off the bat, like, he was just so uncomfortable in that car at the beginning of the 2022 season. And that wasn't really his fault. He was just very uncomfortable in the Ferrari car. When it did adapt, he started to perform. He had a few races towards the end of the season last year. Obviously, Silverstone was the win, but I think actually after the summer break, where he found that consistency a little bit more often, I think he was much more impressive. There were a few outliers in there, of course, but I think he was closer to Charles Leclerc in that second half of the season. I think that will continue over into this season. I could see those two actually being a lot closer in terms of the standings this year as well. Then we've got Vasseur coming in with those two. Now, Vasseur is going to absolutely love this driver pairing, right? He's already talked about it. He worked with Charles Leclerc at Alfa Romeo, and he tried to sign Carlos Sainz for two different teams. He tried to sign him for Renault, but by the time Sainz went to Renault, Vasseur had moved on. And then he also tried to sign Carlos Sainz for Alfa Romeo when they were looking at like Kimi Räikkönen, Giovinazzi, that kind of thing. He also tried to get Carlos Sainz then. So Vasseur has finally got his man. Vasseur has finally come into a team where he can set a precedent, right? I think the thing with Ferrari that they've had over the last few seasons, and tell me if I'm completely off the mark here, but I think with Ferrari, when it's come into, picking a strategist or a team boss or somebody along those lines, they've always gone internal, right? Binotto has worked literally all the way up, right? He's kind of got that story where he's been in the team for 20 years and he's worked his way all the way to the top. Vasseur has come in. He's a guy outside. He's come into the Ferrari setup. Yes, he's worked with Ferrari in that, Alfa Romeo use Ferrari pieces. He's worked very closely with Binotto. He seems very good friends with Binotto. He works with Gunther, who also take Ferrari parts, right? And they all seemed very good friends, the three Ferrari-powered team bosses. But I think he comes in and he can take no prisoners, right? He is not friends with these people. He hasn't been in the Ferrari setup for 20 years. He doesn't care if he has to point the finger at somebody. He will just do it. He will point the finger if you are not doing what he wants. And he will get rid of you if you are not doing what he wants. If he is given that power at Ferrari, and he is given that ability to take no prisoners, make changes, and be decisive, I think it could be a really good step for Ferrari. If he isn't, and still the internal politics of Ferrari is the main factor, then I think Ferrari are just still going to be stuck where they were before. And the blame is probably going to go on to Vasseur again. Maybe they'll replace Vasseur in 3 or 4 seasons and the cycle will just continue. But I think like Vasseur is a really good person to bring in for the team. Did I think Binotto deserved to go? No. But do I think Vasseur coming in is a big step forward? Yes. And I'm really excited to see. Finally, Red Bull. I'm not going to talk too much about Red Bull, to be honest with you, because there's not too much to say. Max Verstappen, Sergio Perez coming in, double World Championship winners last season, comfortably too in the end, right? They ended up winning both championships by a considerable margin, and they were fairly unlucky not to get Sergio Perez second in the Drivers' Championship as well. I think they kind of tried to do that as much as they possibly could. Max Verstappen in Brazil didn't agree. But obviously they've had that wind tunnel reduction. Christian Horner said it was going to cost them 0.5 of a second. If it did, my goodness me, what on earth a car they would have had if that did cost them 0.5 of a second. But I don't think that wind tunnel time reduction has cost Red Bull that much. I think it will have more of an impact over the next few seasons rather than instant impact on this season to do. Car does seem pretty good. They've developed it positively, in my opinion. It looks like they've moved it again in a positive direction. Max is on fire. I think like the one thing that we really just have to say is Max is absolutely on fire. I don't like Max Verstappen. I think in terms of the drivers on the grid, at least he's got a little bit of personality about him. I feel like that ebbs and flows sometimes. Like sometimes it feels like Max Verstappen's like one of the funnier guys on the grid and one of the nicer guys on the grid. And other times it feels like he's just like a spoiled brat. It really does ebb and flow with Max Verstappen. I don't really like him that much, but I do respect him. I do respect that he is by far and away one of the best drivers on the Formula One grid right now. And I think if he's going to win another championship, it will probably be this year. Like I could see Red Bull delivering him a car again where he just gets another championship. I think it's going to be more competitive for him. We're going to see him battle with Charles Leclerc a little bit more often, maybe Sergio Perez a little bit more often, maybe Lewis Hamilton and George Russell a little bit more often. I think it's not going to be as easy going for Max Verstappen as it was in 2022, but I still think he'll probably edge it out, and I still think Red Bull will probably edge it out, and I think they're going to not dominate in the same way that they did last year, but still come out on top is how I kind of think that this Red Bull season is going to go. And from testing, I think that's where we're also seeing it, right? Perez putting in the fastest lap on the final day almost felt like, this is where we're at now. Like, we are the fastest car in testing. And Max Verstappen obviously did all of the beginning testing, day 1 and day 2. Seemed a bit weird that he wanted to go for the day 1, day 2. Maybe it was just because he preferred those sessions or personal preference from him. But usually, you're working on the kinks. So maybe he just wanted to be in the car at the beginning to work on those kinks and make sure that he had the setup that he wanted. And then Sergio Perez kind of came in for the final 3 sessions and was like, okay, we've already sorted the car, have we? I guess I'll learn how to drive this car for the foreseeable future. What do I think Merc will be? I think Merc will come second. Okay, let's go. Let's do this top 3. Red Bull first, Mercedes second, Ferrari third. But I could see it. I could see it any which way. I could see it any which way. That's how I feel right now. But there we go. Perez would not have been second even if Max let him through in Brazil. I know. But it's just funny to like poke a little bit of fun at Red Bull, isn't it? They had an incredible season. Like they won so many Grand Prix. We can poke a little bit of fun at Red Bull every now and then, just for the few hiccups that they had along the way. But that's my testing roundup. We've been live for nearly an hour. Thank you guys so much for joining. Thank you, Jamie, again for the 10 memberships. That is absolutely incredible. I'm going to try something here. There's a little bit different. There is 60 odd of you in the chat right now. There is a link in the description down below to a video that has just gone live on my channel literally 60 seconds ago. What I would love you to do is everybody, as I end this stream, click on that little link, have a little watch of the video, leave a like on there as well. I'm going to try something where on these Sundays I try and go live, a little bit of a Formula 1 chat, and then drop the weekly video on top of that as well. So little link in the description as well for you. Am I going to any races this year? Unfortunately not. I mean, I might, but at this point, I haven't planned to as of yet. But as I said, that is my roundup. That is my little look of testing, how I'm feeling about all of the teams now moving forward. I know there was a little bit of a ramble from me, but I love just getting your guys' opinions on what I'm thinking and feeling moving into the 2023 season. Lots of Formula 1 content coming out this weekend as well. This week, sorry, and then moving into the Bahrain race. First race of the season will be live for qualifying and live for the race as well. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it. Thank you so much for watching again, and I'll see you next time.